conceptual art that was put together. Oh, I just heard it.
Bernie Wrightson.
Art.
Bernie Wrightson.
Bernie
Yeah.
Wrightson.
So the two questions on the Shadow over Innsmouth script and talk about the concept art.
These ones were awesome.
Thank you. We changed the concept of the deep one. In the original, the art you're referring to was done by Bernie Wrightson for another script that we did that was called Shadow over Innsmouth. That was never made. But in working on concept drawings with him, one of the things that we kept coming back to was that all of the creatures, if we were to play them the way Lovecraft described them, they all ended up looking like the creature from the Black Lagoon, which I think was very heavily influenced by Lovecraft, actually. And that, we wanted to try to come up with something fresh, and when we did Dagon, it was actually inspired by a dish that we used to eat in Galicia that's called pulpo gallego, which is octopus. And so the idea was that maybe instead of turning into fish people, they should be turning into octopi, and because Lovecraft seems to love tentacles so much, it seemed like a good idea. And DH got involved with storyboarding, when we went to work to find it.
Well, all I can say about concept art and so forth, although I do that at times, I mostly just storyboarded some of Stuart's ideas. I think by the time I was on the project, for what little time I was, because he was going to shoot it off in Spain, he pretty much had his own vision, and he mostly was just letting me draw it out. And actually, and this is not a bad thing, he wasn't really pulling much for me. A lot of the times I sat with the directors and we tossed things back and forth. It's pretty hard. He pretty much, for the most part, knew what he wanted, and all I had to do was draw it. So that was easy. I think I don't think I had any real input on any concept. I think it, it's all Stuart, and the lighting and everything is very beautiful. But I didn't influence that much. Just drew out his vision.
More questions? Yeah, you're right there. I'll get you next. In the hat. Tell us more about the location and the reaction to the shooting. In the location in Spain? So how the Spaniards were reacting? Yeah, how the Spaniards were reacting.
That town is called Combarro, and it's on the coast of Galicia, right above Ecuador, and it's actually a medieval town. And what did I say? Oh! Anyway, it is a medieval town, and they were very, very welcoming. I mean, they were really glad to have the shoot there.
We actually got funding from the Galicia, which is that section of Spain, the northwest coast, and I was kind of wondering what they were going to make of this. This is not going to be good for tourism. And I got a message one day saying that people from the Galicia Arts Council need to talk to you. You've just read the script, and I'm going, oh no. And I picked up the phone, and the woman says, in your script, you refer to Gallego, which is the language they speak there, as being a dialect of Spanish. It's not a dialect, it's a completely different language. And I said, oh, okay. I said, that's it.
But one of the funny things is that in Spain, this movie is kind of seen in a way like, well, that could never happen. I mean, come on. It would be ridiculous. Texas made it. These things can happen in the U.S.
Well,
but not in Spain.
Well, when we were working on Shadow over Innsmouth, we were scouting locations in Massachusetts, which is where Lovecraft set the town, Yuzna. And the idea of trying to figure out a way that this town could be so isolated from the rest of the world that no one would know that this was going on. You know, we finally did find a town in Maine that seemed to make more sense. It was a very, you know, completely in the middle of nowhere kind of place. But I think, you know, Americans would have had that same problem if we had done in you know, Lovecraft, you know, sort of Massachusetts. You know, how could this be taking place in, you know, in the
Such
real world?
high-end real estate. Our coasts just don't have that
So yeah, but
remote feeling anymore.
so the Spaniards, when they saw the movie, were kind of like, what the hell?
There's another question up in front. No? Okay. I want to get about 2 more questions. I see 1, 2, 3. Okay. Way in the back.
Yes, do you have any more plans to work on any future Lovecraft projects?
Great question. Do you have any more plans to work on future H.P. Lovecraft projects?
Well, I've got a script that's taken over 20 years to get made, which is an adaptation of Dennis Paoli, who wrote the screenplay for all of the Lovecraft movies that we've done. He's done for The Thing on the Doorstep. And we've been trying to get that movie made forever, and it's still one I would love to see. I'd love to see that get made. It's one of the few Lovecraft stories that actually has a woman character.
And then there was another one. Yeah. So we're talking about the actor who played Zadok for Alan.
Francisco Rabal, who is huge. I mean, he's a god, you know, in the Spanish cinema. You know, I mean, he made movies with Buñuel. He's, you know, it would be kind of the equivalent of getting Sean Connery or someone like that to do a movie for us. And it turned out the reason that he wanted to do this film was that he was a huge fan of H.P. Lovecraft. And the first time I met him, I had a long discussion with him about Lovecraft and how much he really wanted to do this movie. And unfortunately, he died, I think, just a few months after we finished shooting this.
It was his last picture.
Yeah, he never saw the finished film.
Okay, I think we got one more. Yeah, I see 2 more. So 1, and then it'll be the last. So, okay.
For DH, have you collected any of the production art together?
Do you guys have a collection of production art?
I was frantically looking for the storyboards and even called Stuart up to see if I had left them with him, and he didn't. And they might be wiped off on my computer. I'm sure somewhere stacked in the, you know, boxes of boards. I have the boards somewhere, and it just may take another year to find them. I still have like a painting upstairs that I'm not sure if Stuart's seen the finished version. I still have dozens of sketches. I've been working on that thing for years off and on, and then I took a 5-year hiatus of, maybe it was because I could never figure out what I wanted to do with Dagon. I quit doing artwork for 5 years, and then I finally just popped back in, you know, about a year ago and finished that painting off, or just about finished it. Debbie wants me to get rid of it because every month I go back and repaint it a little bit more, so, and it takes away from current jobs, but you know, it was a troubling concept. I started, you know, some of the original concept for that, and I tried to bring in, was it Babylonians or Phoenician Babylonians who also had the god Dagon,
Sumerian.
Philistines, yeah. I knew it was some old people, but you know, back I've tried to incorporate some of their concepts of this creature that was a part of all things in the ocean, and according to them, all things came from. And it's kind of hard to try to work. I had to leave a lot of creatures out, you know, trying to, but still keep the thing simplified enough to where I can make a dynamic painting. And that's been difficult. I have tons of sketches for that, but they're technically not production sketches, because after about halfway through those, Stuart's like, we're just going to see that thing at the end. We're never going to see the entire Dagon. I'm like, okay, and I set the painting aside, but continue to work on it a little bit each year for a long time. So
Check outside, and I got one more question in the front. Brian, who did I pick? It's you. You're it.
So, in a lot of your work, I've noticed there's a comedy component, which is awesome. And I'm wondering, this one seemed more serious. And I wondered, was that something you decided to do on purpose, or did you just kind of go in that direction more?
So the question is regarding the comedy element. There's a comedy element in a lot of your films. Was it purposeful to kind of have a more serious element here in Dagon?
Well, I think you never will find an audience that wants to laugh more than a horror movie audience, you know. And so I always think it's a good idea to have something that they can laugh at without, you know, that's not at the expense of the movie. And the thing about this one is that the concept is so crazy that you're kind of walking a tightrope on this one. Because if it gets too silly, then the whole movie kind of falls apart. But I think one of the things about this movie, when we were working on it, we started believing Lovecraft. That's one of the great things about the stories, you know, of Dagon and Shadow of Innsmouth, is he makes you believe it. And it's what it really is about is this sort of backwards evolution. You know, we all came out of the sea originally, and so the idea that we would return to the sea doesn't seem so far-fetched. And in our story, we keep talking about fate in the movie. But what I think Lovecraft's really talking about is he's talking about genetics. He's talking about being afraid of your own genetics and the idea that these are the things that you cannot change. That your makeup is what it is. And so you know, that's the ultimate horror. You know, Lovecraft's parents both were institutionalized. They both, you know, ended up in madhouses. And Lovecraft, his entire life, was afraid that he was going to go crazy and end up the same way. That idea runs through a lot of his stories.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Brian, Stuart, and DH are going to be around. DH has a booth upstairs. Thank you guys so much. We're going to take a very short break. It says 15, but we're going to do a 10-minute break. Finish your voting for the short films. We ran out of ballots.